A word from our sponsors. Headed to Cannes? So are we. With the addition of Audigen, Experian is now your end-to-end solution for data-driven advertising, helping you understand your customers, reach them across channels, and measure what matters. The result? More relevant experiences for consumers, more revenue opportunities for publishers, and better performance for brands. Book a meeting with our team at Experian.com/Cannes. That's Experian.com/CANNES.
This podcast is brought to you by Adelaide. Media verification and measurement are undergoing major disruption. Legacy players are pivoting to performance advertising, AI is reshaping brand safety, and attention is replacing viewability. Adelaide is leading this shift with AU, a new way to assess media quality that scores placements based on their potential to drive attention and outcomes before your ads run. Think of it like a credit score for media. Finally, a clear view of quality before you buy. Take the guesswork out of your investment strategy and try Adelaide AU on your next campaign. Welcome to the Marketecture Podcast. This is Ari Paparo. I'm here with Eric Franchi, and our guest this week is Olivia Kory, who is the Chief Strategy Officer from Haus. They are a research company. They measure effectiveness of ads, and they've been publishing some really interesting reports and other things on LinkedIn, et cetera. You probably have seen Olivia out there. Eric, have you been following the work of Haus?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been following the work of Olivia specifically. She pops up all the time with really sharp things to say, particularly about some of these topics around like AppLovin and incrementality and all of these like very of the moment topics that everybody's thinking about. So it's great to have an expert that we can talk to about these topics.
Yeah, and I love measurement. Measurement's a fun topic. So we're just going to dive right in. We also have a fun little story about everyone's favorite startup, Quibi. So let's hear it. All right, welcome Olivia Kory, the Chief Strategy Officer for Haus.
Thanks, Ari. Thanks, Eric. Good to be here.
So before we started recording, you reminded me about the last time we met, which was a little of a funny story. Would you like to tell the story, or should I?
Oh, I would love to. It's it's a career highlight of mine that when I was at Quibi, we had come over from Netflix, and so the mobile app ecosystem was kind of brand new to us, and so we set up a bunch of meetings with vendors that we thought we could learn from, figure out like what our tech stack should look like. And at the last minute, Meg Whitman, our CEO, of course, famous from eBay and HP, asked to join. She said, I want to learn about this too. And so we brought Meg to New York and we came to the Beeswax office and you all taught us about what's new in DSP buying. It was an interesting altitude because we wanted to figure out our tech stack, but also we had Meg Whitman with us. So It was really hard to program those meetings. That was pretty challenging, but it was a blast.
She was great. Like, I'm one of the few people who could say I got a demo of Quibi from Meg Whitman on her phone. So I liked it when I saw it. It kind of was cool. You demoed like a narrative piece of fiction that changed based on the way you held your phone, like the orientation. It was some pretty innovative stuff. And I think there's a selfie of me and Meg somewhere, but I don't have it.
Beeswax was so cool. Like coming from Netflix, like they were trying to bring their own optimization, like bidding algorithm to these DSPs. And I think that's what you all are famous for, right?
Yeah, that was what we were famous for. So it didn't work out between us, but it was a good meeting and a good story. So I asked you on the show because you are dropping knowledge bombs regularly on LinkedIn and on Twitter, and you're doing all sorts of interesting stuff. So let's just start with the basics. What is Haus and what's your job there?
Yeah, so Haus, I'll give a little bit of the backstory here, and then I'll explain what we do, which is that, a number of us were at Netflix, and as most of you all know, Netflix was running experiments all over the world. They wanted the product to really work, or the marketing to really work like the product, where it's kind of personalized, algorithmic, no two people see the same Netflix. They wanted to take those principles to marketing. And so we had a huge team of data scientists and causal economists and product managers dedicated to helping us run these very kind of rigorous experiments. We were able to bring our CAC down significantly in the time I was there through kind of continuous experimentation. And the insight was really like, okay, this is valuable, but it's super expensive. So what if we could enable access to that level of, and that quality of experimentation, but do it as SaaS for less than the cost of a headcount? And that is what we set out to build. And so what the platform is really is the experimentation incrementality platform where any brand could log in and they could configure an experiment, a geo experiment across any channel, online, offline, Meta, Google, usual suspects, but also TV, out of home radio. And we do all the data science work to say, how much should you spend? How long should you run the test for? How large does your holdout group need to be in order to kind of sufficiently power the test from a statistics standpoint? And then because we're plugged into the data, we can report on the analysis in the data. And so we've just kind of like attached a jetpack to these, the experimentation practice of these brands who want to do more incrementality testing, but they were never really able to get it going.
Yeah. So how is that possible in today's fragmented media world where we don't have identity? You can't measure the same thing on YouTube that you can on open web or on, wherever. What are the tenets of how your system enables that?
The product is GeoLift. When we were kind of like born from the ashes of iOS 14, the company was founded in 2021. And so when folks were figuring out like alternate identifiers and ways to continue to stitch together these user graphs, we skated in the opposite direction and said, we're going to ignore all of this and we're just going to build on Geo. This will persist through the future. And so that's the way in which it's apples to apples across every channel is we say, turn this marketing on in these regions, turn it off in these regions. And we're going to measure the sales lift to your business based on the data coming from your back-end warehouse.
Yeah, Geo's lowest common denominator. Eric, you might remember a conversation you and I had like 3 years ago before we started the podcast about starting a Geo DSP with the exact same idea. And I think I have Bliss coming on this podcast in about 2 weeks, so we'll hear what they did with Geo, but I'm a big Geo fan. So let's go to the fun stuff. Some of what you found over the last series of investigations and studies. Let's talk about YouTube. We don't talk about YouTube enough on this podcast. Overrated or underrated?
Oh, it's way underrated.
Underrated. Okay.
Way underrated. And this is obviously a prior I came in with coming from Netflix where we were spending a lot of money in YouTube. It worked really well for us. But when I started working with these, we work with a lot of e-commerce brands who are heavy in Meta, very concentrated in Meta. And YouTube is maybe not even on their plan or a small share. And so I came in with a prior that brands were underinvested. And so we looked back at 190 incrementality tests that we'd run over the past year or so. And YouTube was underreported by, I don't have the stat top of mind, I think it was like 3.4x. So when you're looking in Google Ads at the effect in your CPAs, it's underreported by 3.42x. There's a lot more there than brands think when they're looking at the click-based model. And it's just so fascinating because all of these brands who are looking at MTA just think that YouTube can't work. It's like, no, just like move off of attribution. Like people are not clicking on this media. It's mostly happening on TV screens in terms of the exposure. So it's a classic video story of if you're measuring this on clicks, you're not going to see anything. Doesn't mean it's not working.
Yeah, people don't click on the videos generally or on the ads. So when you say underreported, just to dive into that, you're talking about Google's own reporting is underreporting its most valuable media property.
Isn't that so ironic?
Because of the click issue?
Yeah, I mean, Google Analytics and all their measurement systems were developed to favor the click-based conversion. And so in doing so and focusing on clicks, you're actually way underreporting YouTube.
And Meta is happy about this because Meta's ads are much more clickable. Like Instagram ads are sort of meant to be clicked. Is that right?
Yeah, Meta's, I would say they over-report, but most brands are not really looking at platform data these days anyway. They're looking at an MTA or some sort of third-party, like objective source of truth.
So do you think video in general is underreported, under-credited, or is it a YouTube-specific phenomenon?
I don't have the data on other, video. The OTT space is so fragmented that it's kind of hard to see, okay, this specific OTT media is doing this in terms of performance. So we haven't done the analysis on, okay, what are we seeing in the OTT world, which publishers are doing better than others? But we tend to see anecdotally that video is underreported.
Right. Any other insights on YouTube about what marketers should be doing there besides measuring it? Obviously, measuring gives you a good basis. But any other thoughts about like what they should be thinking in terms of targeting and outcomes?
We were all, I think, skeptical when they started transitioning over from video action to demand gen, because it felt like PMAX all over again, where it's like, give me some assets and a budget and I'm going to decide where to spend your budget. But we're actually seeing some good things here. Demand gen has been outperforming video action. So I think that's just a good sign for marketers that like the way in which Google is moving us is actually probably going to benefit them in terms of outcomes.
Would you mind explaining those two terms for the folks on this who are listening, who are more like ad tech geeks and not social media geeks?
Yes. So demand gen is like, basically think of it as analogous to PMAX. It's like this new, I think they call it demand gen because it's a little more like mid-funnel than lower funnel, and it's delivering across all of Google's O&O, but primarily video and not so much search. So they started migrating over to this of just like, give us your budget, give us some assets. We're going to decide where in the Google ecosystem this gets spent to best deliver on performance. And brands were so mad. They're like, oh, this is PMAX all over again, where I'm losing control. I don't have the ability to segment out where I want these to deliver. And so they made this change at some point this year where they deprecated video action, which is YouTube. It's like, I want to go in and buy YouTube for performance. Instead, you have to buy Google Demand Gen, which runs across this whole swath of inventory. And advertisers were pretty mad about it, but it's actually working well, which is a good thing.
And also, it seems to me like, given that the sort of studies you're doing take time and aren't always on for many advertisers, they may, and tell me if I'm wrong about that, but they may actually be doing themselves more harm than good, because if they're using, let's say, DV360 to buy YouTube and they're optimizing on the wrong thing, like clicks, they may be harming their performance in real world outcomes. Does that make sense? Yes,
I agree with that. I think this is probably moving in the right direction.
What would you recommend they actually do?
I think that these platforms are like really good at doing what you tell it to do. Give it a signal and I'll go find it. And so Meta is notorious for this, of just like whatever event you go tell it to find, it will go find. And so that's my advice for these marketers is these systems are designed to go find whatever you want, but you have to validate that it's truly incremental and they're not just like knocking off or picking off low-hanging fruit that was coming in anyway. So you have to be very thoughtful around the event that you feed it.
All right, let's move on from that to everyone's favorite topic, AppLovin. So you did some studies on AppLovin, and AppLovin, as everyone probably knows, has been the most extreme success story, I think, in digital advertising over the past 6 months or a year. Their stock skyrocketed, the results are skyrocketing, and a lot of skeptics have come out with different degrees of aggressiveness on their skepticism. So you did a study on AppLovin, and it caused some controversy. But let's just start with, what did the study find?
Yeah, we've been running AppLovin tests pretty consistently for the past maybe 9 months or so. And what I would say is that these brands that we work with are dying for a strong number 3 partner. I mentioned this up top, they're very concentrated in Meta. They want to diversify. They want to be less reliant. So they have Meta and Google, and then they just have a bunch of partners hanging out at number 3 with very small shares of spend that they can't scale. And so, I came in pretty skeptical, just we all did, in terms of all right, how is this differentiated from anything else you can access through a DSP? But they gave ad credits to these e-com businesses, credit to them that they got them testing and they actually got them to try it. And so we started running holdouts on it, and we saw pretty clear, discernible lift. The story is broadly pretty positive. Now, the question is, how much can it scale? Just like every other number 3 partner, it's you can see very strong lift at these smaller, lower spend levels, but how much can you really push in? And that's where we're at right now, where these brands, what we saw in the data was really strong efficiency, very clear lift at these lower spend levels, 5, 10, 20K a week. But when you start trying to punch up to 50, 60, 70, 80K a week, efficiency is, it's falling, and it's okay, well, then does it make sense to keep moving dollars from Meta or from Google if this next best dollar is not as efficient, is my first my first 10K. So that's where we're at right now is like, I was just, as somebody who wants to help brands grow, I was excited about the promise of a new channel for them and the ability to diversify. But the question and the open question is like, all right, how much can this really scale?
So that seems like pretty milquetoast sort of research result. What happened next? You sort of turned into, you got QAnoned more or less by these lunatics online that somehow thought that you were the devil incarnate for publishing this research.
Yeah, they think that I'm like a app stock pumper. They call me a stock pumper, which is I've never owned any stock in AppLovin. And again, I was skeptical to begin with because I came from this world of DSPs and I know how hard it is to really differentiate. So it's hilarious. And that my motivations are so transparent here, which is like we want to help brands find places to diversify their spend. And so when we see something that has promise, we're of course going to talk about it because that's a great story and it's a great opportunity for these companies to diversify. So it's been interesting in terms of the things I've been named on the internet.
Okay, let's talk about the future of measurement, right? So geotesting, we've talked about. Is there a role for things like media mix modeling and multi-touch moving forward, or is the overall trend changing?
We feel pretty strongly, and kind of our North Star at Haus is that experiments are the best way to establish ground truth. So everything that we do will continue to be kind of anchored on experiments. And again, this is like the idea of causality. Like we have a holdout group, this group of markets or regions where you're not spending so that we can understand the counterfactual of what would have happened anyway. This is like the core of what we do and what we've built our product around. And in terms of MMM, it's really hard for a model to establish causality, to like disentangle, because when you're spending up, that is often at the same time your business is going up based on seasonality. In Q4, your Sonos, like it's holiday season, you're going to spend up on every channel and your business is going to go up. And it's really hard for a model to disentangle what's driving what, like what is cause and effect. And so we're moving into the MMM market. Like we think experiments are the way to kind of fix this problem, right? Is if you could feed experiments into the model and build an MMM on top of this experiment data, this is actually a very useful tool. I actually don't think it's like experiments versus MMM. I still think experiments need to be the foundation here, but an MMM makes it a lot easier to do things that are kind of manual right now in Haus, where it's like budget planning, like scenario planning, asking what if questions of what if I move this amount of money from Meta into YouTube? What would happen? And what does that return curve look like? Right now, it's just a little bit clunky to do without like a nice, slick kind of UI. And so that's why we're entering MMM, is to just make some of these questions like a little more turnkey to answer in like a clean kind of slick UI. But yeah, the root of everything we do is going to be continued to be founded in experiments.
And there used to be a big thing around ghost bidding. That was a really hot topic. My take was that ghost bidding, which was the idea that you sort of fake bid on a holdout group, that died when the cookie died. Is that your point of view too? Yep.
Yeah, we used to love ghost bidding and conversion lift at Netflix. So this would have been, pre-2020 and iOS 14. But the privacy changes have like really challenged user level lift studies. Like, again, we loved them. I think they're more, they're like much less noisy than geotests. In a perfect world, you're running these user level studies and they're a lot more accurate because they're just more precise. But the privacy changes have kind of made them like, very, very difficult, very challenged. And as an example, Google's conversion lift, I think they have to model all of iOS. Like it just doesn't work with iOS. And so then you start to, really question how well they can model it. And so, I used to be a user of conversion lift, but it's tough.
Yeah, I think it is pretty challenging moving forward. All right, well, let's call it there. That was a really interesting conversation. We definitely learned some stuff about YouTube and different methodologies. We will take a break and we will come back with the refresh news of the week. This podcast is brought to you by Burt Intelligence. Take back your Mondays with Burt Intelligence, the publisher BI platform that turns chaos into clarity. And now with their new product, Burt Leads, publisher sales teams can uncover hidden gems, recapture lost opportunities, and upsell deals with intelligence. Stop guessing and start closing. Sign up during May for an extended trial at burt.ai/adtechgod. That's BURT.AI/AdTechGod.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And we are here with the refresh. So another week of a bunch of news. We'll start with Microsoft DSP being shut down. That was announced yesterday. And then we've got some takes and news out of the Luma DMS conference, an acquisition, an IPO valuation coming in ad tech, and a bunch of other stuff. We have time. So let's start it from the top. Yesterday, there was an announcement that the Microsoft Invest DSP is being sunsetted in end of February 2026. There were a few takes about this, and to be honest, the post is quite confusing. We'll link to it in the newsletter. But
it is very confusing.
The title of the post on the Microsoft blog is "Empowering Businesses for a Future That is Conversational, Personal, and Agentic," and it's flowery and long and clearly written either by or with the augmentation of AI. But in the middle of it, there is a line that says, "As a result, we will no longer support media buying through our DSP, Microsoft Invest, starting in February 28, 2026. Ari, you had, I think, a very sharp, nuanced take on this. Let me get yours first, and then maybe we can talk about some of the other things that people are saying.
Yeah, I'll just start by saying this blog press release was like, it was a Google level quality for obfuscating what they were really trying to say.
It was a tough read.
Usually Google gets to the point in their third paragraph, and you had to go to like paragraph 5 before you got to the point of this. Okay, so the quick, easy take is as follows, which is Microsoft's advertising business is killing it. We talked about that in a previous episode. That's like $40 billion. It's being driven by LinkedIn and a lot of other really great proprietary supply. And they have demand coming in from effectively 3 sources. They have their own ad manager called the Microsoft Ad Platform, like AdWords. You log in and you buy stuff. They have the Xandr DSP, and then they have third-party DSPs like the Trade Desk and people like that. So of those, the Xandr DSP is probably the smallest, growing the slowest. It probably has the lowest margin overall take rate when they do that, because it's expensive to maintain. And probably in order to make it compete, it would require a lot of investment, and it's unlikely it would be that successful. So just pure business considerations, shutting it down probably has very little effect on the metric they care about, which is their margin on their O&O ad inventory. And so unlike Google, who's big enough to support Google Ad Manager and DV360, there's not a really compelling reason why Microsoft needs to have a DSP. That's kind of the very short, easy answer. The longer answer, if you take what they actually said in this long blog post for real, is that maybe they're thinking that a closed system will be better in an AI era because the closed system can share data more freely, like data about the person's LinkedIn profile if you're running on LinkedIn. And that's the kind of data that you can't send over the wire to a programmatic source of demand. Now, they are still going to be available in some form to users of Yahoo DSP and Trade Desk DSP. So they'll still be available to some extent, but they clearly seem to think that they'll get better results, better yield, and better margins from their closed loop system, which is another piece of evidence that it's not a great time to be in the sort of open web traditional programmatic area.
When I read it, it's 90% about agentic AI and the future of AI, and a little line about this and what it means. This also comes during a week where they announced they were laying off 7,000 people, and reading between the lines, a lot of this was about like AI. So my take was this was aligned with what seems to be happening at Microsoft and frankly other companies as well, which is like aggressively moving towards an AI future, which is probably connected to, what you were saying. But I read this, I saw AI. I did not see this as, kind of sunsetting something that had low margins.
Yeah, we also have talked about this, I think, on the pod, which is these tech first companies are now AI first, and they're light years ahead of ordinary businesses, even knowledge working businesses, in terms of the way they've been able to maintain their cost control while revenues go up. And I think that the more traditional businesses are just starting to wake up to this fact that they could have massive improvements in productivity if they bring AI to every employee, or at least every knowledge worker.
Yeah, that makes sense. Olivia, does Microsoft crush it?
We do a lot of Bing tests. We have some LinkedIn tests. I have to look at that. Maybe that's a new meta-analysis for us. But what's really interesting about Xandr, it's called Xandr, right?
Microsoft Invest.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hadn't heard much about them for a very long time. And then Netflix, if you remember, decided to build their ads business on Xandr, or what is, now known as Microsoft Invest, like 3-4 years ago. And I just remember being so confused. One, because Netflix tends to build versus buy. And I just Xandr was just like, to your point, I think the number 4 or the number 5. So that was always a very confusing decision. They don't use them anymore, but I remember being surprised.
I think the scuttlebutt there was that Microsoft guaranteed them a minimum CPM that was extremely high to get the deal. And because the ad operations were sort of rushed out, Ted Sarandos really wanted to juice revenue in the first couple of quarters. So they took advantage of Microsoft's desperation.
The legendary $65 CPM.
$65 globally. So you had to get that in Korea and Vietnam and places like that.
The CPM heard around the world. I'm sure this is going to have some further implications. So this is not going to be the last time we talk about Microsoft giving their shifts to the ad tech business. Let's move on. So Tuesday of this week, the DMS by Luma conference happened in New York City. Both Ari and I attended. Shout out to Terry for the invite and putting together what was a really good conference.
Great event.
Yeah,
Terry.
It was really, really good. Yeah, Terry, great job. Let's talk about what we saw, what we heard there. Why don't you go first, Ari?
It was good to see so many senior people. Jeff Green spoke at the end of the day. I thought he was pretty forthcoming. Krishan Bhatia, who's now the head of video at Amazon, it was good to see him. I'm trying to get him on the pod. So if you're listening, Krishan, we're waiting for you. It's just great to see executives talking and talking about what they see moving forward. I don't have anything meaty to say here. It was just a good event.
I got some meaty stuff. Let's talk about two things. So they kick off the day, and I've been going to these for very years. Again, super lucky. Thank you, Terry. With their state of digital. And this one was really well done. If it's not posted publicly yet, I'm sure they will do so. And there were two things that I thought was interesting during that presentation. The first was they talked about AI, and they talked about AI a lot during the day and throughout the sessions. And we should get back to the panel that you led, Ari. But they talked about the AI first startup phenomena that we're seeing right now, which is companies launching today that are AI first. They are launching with less capital. They are getting traction faster, and they are likely going to get, and this is a Luma conference, so, kind of a little bit of bias here, likely to get acquired earlier. And this is something that we're seeing, in our investments every single day. We're resetting our models based on what we're seeing. And I thought that was interesting that they, articulated it in that way. Later on in the day, there was a AI first startup panel that you led, which had Swivel, Chalice, Firsthand, and Newton Research. A few of them are portfolio companies. And I thought it was underscoring what they were talking about, which was these companies, they're doing very, very interesting things. They're getting traction quickly. And it really feels like the industry is starting to pay more attention to the effects of AI and what some of these startups might be doing to change the industry.
Yeah, I think those startups you mentioned, they all kind of indicated that they themselves are AI first, that they're being very productive in their use of capital and their use of manpower. And I'm not seeing as much from the legacy folks who are very big, profitable businesses in some cases, but maybe aren't as aggressively rolling out AI or otherwise investing in this area.
Yeah, there was a slide that made its way around, the David versus Goliath, that I thought captured it well. The other thing that I thought was fascinating from that initial presentation was they spent a fair amount of time talking about creators. And there was one slide that I was standing in the back and I was like, holy cow, kind of made my feet shift, which was Unilever said that they are going to 20x their spend on creators this year. Not increase 20%. 20x. And, I'm trying to spend more time in this space. And I want to ask, Olivia, what you guys see around tracking, the impact of creators. I talk to marketers and those who are serving them, And creators just move product in a way that is like really, really difficult to replicate in any other way. So I don't know if ad tech is going to start making its way into the creator space. I don't know what the play is there, but I think it's something we have to pay attention to. I was like shook. 20x in terms of spend. That's a lot of money.
We're seeing this right now where I think influencer creator is the fastest growing channel, if you call it that, on the media plan. It's tricky to measure because you can't geosegment a creator post. And so we're not geolist testing, but it's, these brands like see very clear pops when a creator is posting on their behalf. So yeah, it is very fast growing. Like I was mentioning, like the number 3 who after Google and Meta, what's like the number 3 channel? Influencer is just kind of like, wrapped up in here in Google and Meta. It's all over the place. And there are companies who are trying to make this easy. Like there's this company, I think it's called Agentio, that's trying to like really scale the whole business of creators and influencers and make it more scalable. Because that was my experience when I was on the brand side. Is really tough to scale a program like that, especially if you're a global business. It's like you have to go into each individual country and do your research on who to be working with. So yeah, whoever can figure out how to scale this is going to be really well positioned.
In a sense, it's like the return of affiliate networks. These are roughly affiliate programs, more or less. The creator goes on TikTok and talks about the product, and then the person clicks through the TikTok store, and the TikTok store is really just a really thin layer on top of someone else's distribution and fulfillment system, and everyone takes a little cut. So it's brilliant. It's like the thing that always works is hearing from your friends or from celebrities.
And maybe that's the way that AppLovin, going back to our early conversation, could become number 3, is if they acquire TikTok, like Adam seems to want to do.
Who wouldn't want to acquire TikTok?
Yeah, I'd like to acquire TikTok. All right.
Make a move.
Anything from Jeff Green's talk that you want to hit on, or should we just talk about Open Sincera?
Let's move on to Open Sincera, which is a little bit of an interesting side note here.
So walk us through Open Sincera. Go ahead, Ari.
Well, Trade Desk acquired Sincera a couple months ago. Both Eric and I were involved in that. And Sincera had this sort of blueprint of the web from a advertising perspective. They knew who's in the header. They knew where the ads were, how the ads refreshed, all this really cool data that was pretty obviously valuable to the Trade Desk for bidding purposes, anti-fraud, all that good stuff. And then, somewhat surprisingly, they launched an open version of the Sincera data set that lets you download it with an API so that competitors or other people in the ecosystem can participate in the same data. So it's interesting. It's great. I appreciate the free data. I'm going to use it in some projects. I'm not really sure what the business model, or if there is a business model here, or if it's just trying to make the data more standard so that the overall ecosystem improves. Do you know what the idea is here for making it open?
Well, I know what was said publicly, which is what you just walked through. And I asked Mike O'Sullivan immediately after it was announced. He was at the conference. I asked him, I was like, is this actually the opposite of what everybody was expecting? Because what everybody was expecting was Sincera would be closed off effectively from the rest of the ecosystem. It would become, some sort of proprietary data set for TTD. And he said, yeah, like, we're going open, which I think is like really cool. And to your point, everybody appreciates it. The thing that I've heard in terms of takes is the more that this gets adopted, the more this advances the vision that TTD has of what the premium internet looks like. Could that be the real, value creation for TTD here at the end of the day? Or like Sincera starts to define what's premium, what's not premium, what's, implicitly good, bad, and that, advances the vision of TTD for the premium internet, the SP500. Perhaps that's the case here, but I don't know.
Yeah, if you want to put on your 3D chess hat here, the strategy that Trade Desk has been undertaking over the past 18 months or so, I characterize it as like your ad tech tax is my opportunity. So Jeff and team have been commoditizing SSPs, and they've been commoditizing TV operating systems, and they're basically trying to take more of that value chain. And so One thought here is that by giving Sincera data, which is telemetry on quality, to anyone who wants, including advertisers and their agencies, they're undercutting the verification companies who are a big part of the ad tech tax. So you could pay a verification company 25 cents, 45 cents to tell you that a given web page is not made for advertising, or you can write a little script that takes the open source data, turns it into a whitelist or blacklist in Trade Desk and pay zero.
Right. And then as long as you're a TTD customer, you can ensure that you're buying that inventory.
Yeah, right. And they could have done that on a closed basis, but making it open maybe reduces the concern among customers about lock-in and all that sort of stuff.
All right, cool. The other thing that was announced at Luma, because Luma was the company that did the deal, was an acquisition. So Perion acquired Greenbids, which was a little known custom algo company out of France, and public company. Numbers are public. So there's a total deal value of approximately 65 million. I wasn't familiar with Greenbids going into this, so it looks like it was a sustainability play that broadened its vision to custom algos. But it seems like super impressive. And I met the founder at the event. He was obviously really excited, and it seems to be like a very interesting acquisition for Perion. And I wonder if we see more of this in the future for these custom algo companies.
Yeah, I'd never heard of them either, but it's great that they had an exit. So to date, Sybids was, I guess, the only successful custom algo company to have an exit. So it's great that there's a second on that list. Perion's been known as sort of a serial acquirer of, I wouldn't call it distress, but fairly low ticket acquisitions, except for Undertone, which was, the shining star of the 2000s. So I don't know what they're up to. They're like kind of trying to assemble a little RTB stack of some kind, because most of their business is in RTB, I don't think. It's like search, and Undertone is known for premium stuff. So I watch that space, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's something to watch. Perion has, over the course of the past few months, hired Stephen Yap, consolidated what was, to your point, kind of a collection of acquisitions into a unified brand. They've got actually some interesting assets, completely Undertone aside. This Hive Stack out of home platform, like there's some interesting things there. I think you're right. Something to keep an eye on.
Oh, I forgot. Yap was yapping at me at the party. So he told me one thing that he was really impressed with about Greenbids was that they effectively had a money back guarantee. Like they were guaranteeing that their performance worked, which I thought was pretty nice way to sell an optimization solution.
So we have a couple things we should roll through, just other snippets. So Mountain is seeking a $1.24 billion valuation on the IPO. To Olivia's point earlier, TV and, performance TV may be underpriced. So this would be an interesting one given the all the momentum there. What do you think, Ari?
This comes after a DMS, like 3 different people came up to me to tell me the Mountain IPO is off. So it shows how much people know. And also this, I guess we don't have it in our list here, but friend of the pod, Kevin Weatherman, launched his new competitor. What's it called? Up something?
I think it's Upscale. Upscale.ai. So now there's another company in this like small business CTV thing, and good for Mountain. I want to see it go public. Let's go for it. The headline is funny. The headline on Reuters for the story: Ryan Reynolds Mountain.
It's always one. I was trying to work a Blake Lively reference into my little talk, but I couldn't. So Olivia, these platforms, Mountain and TV Scientific, etc., they're all grading their own homework, right? They're all using pixels and IP address and stuff like that. What's your take? Have you done any research on them, and what's your take?
Yep, we see a lot of Mountain. We see a lot of Tatari. And then Tenuity, which I think is formerly kind of Bliss Point, sold to Tenuity. So I see those 3 all the time. We do a lot of tests. Mountain, I think, is primarily connected TV. They don't really play in the linear space. Is that right?
Yeah, it's mostly CTV and online video.
Yep. So that's super easy to geotest. So, we have a lot of data here. And the trickier channel is linear, because you can't just easily, similar to influencers, you can't just easily convert a national remnant cable buy to like, a local buy. And so it comes with its own host of complications, which we're working through and, doing the best we can on. But yeah, we have quite a bit of data on CTV. Again, this may be my next appearance. We'll be bringing some data on these channels that you all are talking about.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, we'd love it when guests bring the data. Break news here on the pod. Yeah,
come with gifts. Hey, speaking of data, there was an article, I think Adweek had the exclusive. I'll read the headline. GroupM's U.S. staff told up to 45% will be impacted by a restructure. Sidebar, it's unclear if affected means layoffs, reassignments, or something else, but that is a big number on a big company.
Yep. Yeah, please meet your new boss. It's a chat prompt.
At DMS, I had a conversation with an agency exec who did not work at GroupM, and he said that, man, if you were to just really get aggressive, you can run that with 2,000 people. And then he thought about it for a second. He's like, I bet you could run GroupM with 200 people, which I think is like crazy talk. But to your point, I think that the AI train is not slowing down. And we'll see a lot of shifts over the course of the next year or so.
Yeah, I think I talked about this on the pod. I can't recall. But, there's generally a feeling that on agency renewals with brands that are coming in 20% lower on headcount for the same business. And it's AI. AI is really driving that. It's not just cost savings. And that's just at the first level. That's not really with the maturity of the technology into every aspect of their organization. Also at DMS, was it I forget the fellow's name. One of the senior execs from Publicis was there, and he talked about
Penske.
how
Penske.
Yeah, and they're taking their whole budget from Cannes, not going to Cannes, and instead investing it in Claude, their AI system. It's a little bit. It's a very agency like announcement to make, but still, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, let's end it on a more positive note. So apropos of Olivia being on the pod, Netflix, their ads tier continues to grow. So they added 94 million. So they're up to 170 million people, which according to them means that they reach more 18 to 34-year-olds than any broadcast or cable network.
Yeah, just to be clear, I think they said they had 94 million subscribers, which is 170 million people.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, it's big. I mean, I still don't know what sort of I'm not on the ad tier. Maybe I should downgrade my Netflix as a science experiment so I can see the ads. Olivia, do you pay?
Do you pay? Same way. Of course I pay. And I think that's, once you're used to not having ads, it's really hard to downgrade. But yeah, it's still lower than YouTube in terms of viewers. That's the stat I keep seeing. YouTube reference is they're bigger even than Netflix.
Olivia, do you think they ever do the Amazon thing and just put an ad in the paid service?
I like that Black Mirror episode. Have you guys watched the most recent episode, the most recent season of Black Mirror?
No, I haven't. There's an ad angle. I haven't seen it.
It's like the Eric Seufert, everything is an ad network. There's a whole episode about how they just weave in these ads to your day-to-day life. So yeah, I mean, they have like some sort of product placement team now, right?
Sure. And also that's part of the live event thing, because you can't have a live event without ads. If they start shoving ads into their premium content, there'd be like a revolution. It would be bad.
I have a question for you guys going back to we should wrap up Netflix, but going back to the agencies laying off 45% of their staff.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love your thoughts. Like what I'm experiencing right now is we know AI is going to make folks more efficient and more productive, but it hasn't happened yet. Where it's like the new GPT images, it's like close to being useful in terms of replacing some of the creative workflows in production, but it's not there yet. So you can't fire your designer. Or like web dev, it's close, but it's not there yet. So you can't fire your dev agency. Are you guys feeling this way where it's like this frustrating moment where it's like you see the advancements, but you actually can't make the team more efficient? Like there's nobody you can actually let go of in reality.
Yeah, I was thinking about firing Eric from this podcast, but the tests have been inconclusive. No, I totally get what you're saying, because I'm a pretty heavy user of these things. And what I'm finding is that it's helping me do work that couldn't have been done otherwise. So it's increasing my productivity, but it's not in any way able to replace annoying tasks or time consuming tasks that are my regular day-to-day. There's always something in the way of doing that. And I think the image example is great, because if I didn't have ChatGPT, my newsletter just wouldn't have an image. I'm not going to hire a illustrator for $1,000 a week to give me an image. So now I have an image, and if it's a little crappy, I don't care, because it's an image. I'd rather have it than not have it. But I'm nowhere near the point where ChatGPT is writing my newsletter or organizing my thoughts even for the newsletter, just because it would take more time to do that than it's worth.
Yeah, a couple thoughts here. I would ask you to consider how much your workflow is being augmented today through AI versus 2 months ago, 6 months ago, and a year ago. I would presume that it's, changed things very, very quickly, and you're using it a lot more, right? So it's like, number one, we're still early in the cycle, but it's moving very fast. Number two, we're seeing the capabilities, coming online faster and faster. So I think it's only a matter of time before the tools catch up with our expectations, in terms of the work. But I think affecting organizations, that's going to be a more tricky one, right? It's going to take time, right? Like, it's manifesting itself in layoffs today. It's manifesting itself less in, the AI tools, starting to replace and augment things. But Joe Hirsch from Swivel was on Ari's pod, and he spoke to some examples. They help publishers and streamers automate ad ops and account management. And he pointed to some examples where tools are being adopted and they do the work of 40 to 50 people. So I think it's only a matter of time, and it's a matter of organizations trying to figure out exactly how they adapt. But I would imagine in 1 to 3 years, everything looks completely different.
Yep. I feel like we're on the brink of just something massive.
Yeah.
But there's no very clear, obvious, I can go replace this team with AI tomorrow.
I think there's also an issue where the skills of the people who are responsible don't match what's needed of them. So you might have a very good middle manager who runs a group in a media company, and that's not the right person to do a business transformation using AI. It's nothing against that person. So where that actually comports pretty well with what Joe from Swivel said, because bringing in a new vendor is something that person is good at. And if the vendor can eliminate the jobs, that's great. But expecting that person to imagine using Cursor and ChatGPT to write a new, module that does certain automatic things is just, it's not the kind of work that person is trained to do.
Yeah, such a good point. I think it also then goes back to what we said in the beginning with this notion of AI first startups. They have just such a massive advantage of starting today and being able to design their organizations, being able to fundraise, being able to just be thoughtful about using these tools from day zero, and I would imagine consultants might have a field day helping with AI transformations over the course of the next 1 to 3 years.
Prime time for consultancies. All right, let's call it there. This was an amazing conversation. Olivia Kory, thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your research and other insights.
Thank you, guys. Big fan. So this is a lot of fun.
All right, Eric, always a pleasure.
Thanks. Thank you, Olivia. See you later, everybody.
Thank you for subscribing to Marketecture. New interviews are added every week at marketecture.tv and your favorite podcasting app.
Thank you for listening to the Marketecture podcast. New episodes come out every Friday, and an insightful vendor interview is published each Monday. You can subscribe to our library of hundreds of executive interviews at marketecture.tv. You can also sign up for free for our weekly newsletter with my original strategic insights on the week's news at news.marketecture.tv. And if you're feeling social, we operate a vibrant Slack community that you can apply to join at adtechgod.com.